At the far end of the street stood a small house with peeling white paint and an old wooden porch that creaked under the weight of time. Yet what drew the eye most was, in the house itself, but the soft glow of the porch light. It was never off. Whether in the stillness of dawn or beneath the heavy rain of midnight, that single bulb burned faithfully, casting its circle of warmth against the shadows. The neighbors noticed it, of course. Some whispered that the old woman who lived there simply forgot to turn it off. Others suggested it was for safety, to ward off strangers. But over time, most people stopped wondering. The light became just another part of the neighborhood, like the oak tree at the corner or the mailbox that leaned too far to the right. It was always there, unchanging, quiet, unnoticed. Inside the house lived a woman in her late 70s, Mrs. Green. Her hair was silver and her steps slow, but her eyes held a kind of softness that spoke of a long life filled with both love and loss. She rarely left her home except for short walks to the store or to tend the few flowers by her porch. Many evenings she would sit in her chair, hands folded on her lap, gazing out at the glow of the light as though it were more than just a bulb, as though it carried meaning that no one else could see. The truth was that Mrs. Green had once lived in a house filled with laughter. Years ago, her husband would sit on that same porch, sipping tea beside her, their conversations weaving through the night, while the porch light glowed warmly above them. It was he who had first said that the light should always stay on, in case someone lost their way and needed a sign to guide them home. When he passed away, she couldn't bring herself to switch it off. It wasn't just a light anymore. It was his promise, his memory, his way of still being there. The neighborhood children sometimes played on the sidewalk outside her home, their shadows stretching long under the glow. They never asked why the light was always on, though some of them admitted later that, when they walked past her house at night, they felt safer, as though the world was a little less frightening with that gentle glow watching over them. For Mrs. Green, the light was more than safety, more than habit. It was her way of keeping loneliness from swallowing her whole. The silence inside her home was heavy, but the light reminded her that the darkness outside didn't have to win. One summer evening, when the air was thick with the hum of cicadas, a young boy from across the street finally gathered the courage to cross her yard. His name was Daniel, 14 years old, restless, and often wandering through thoughts too heavy for his age. He had noticed the light for months since his family moved in. Unlike the adults who shrugged it off, Daniel couldn't let it go. Why would someone leave a light on every single night? He found Mrs. Green sitting on her porch, a thin shawl around her shoulders despite the warmth. She looked up, surprised but gentle, as Daniel hesitated at the bottom step. He asked, almost shyly, if she ever forgot to turn her light off. For a moment, she simply studied him, her gaze deep but not unkind. Then she smiled, a soft, weary smile, and invited him to sit. That was the beginning. At first, their conversations were small, about school, about the weather, about her flowers that stubbornly bloomed each spring. But one evening, when the sun melted into the horizon and the light above them flickered to life, Daniel asked again about it. Why did she keep it on? Her voice was quiet, almost like she was speaking to herself. She told him about her husband, how he had believed in leaving the light burning, so no one ever felt lost in the dark. She spoke of evenings spent together under that glow, of promises whispered that life had not kept, and of how the house felt unbearably empty after he was gone. Daniel listened, his hands folded tightly, his chest tightening in a way he didn't expect. He knew something about absence to his own father, worked long hours, and was hardly ever home. Sometimes, Daniel felt invisible, like a shadow in his own house. Hearing Mrs. Green's story stirred something in him, a recognition that loss wasn't only about death. It could also be about distance, about being unseen. As the days passed, Daniel visited more often. Sometimes he brought her groceries. Sometimes he sat silently while she shared stories of her youth, of teaching children who reminded her of him, of traveling once to the sea, of the love she had built and lost. He began to realize that her light wasn't just for her husband. It was for anyone wandering, anyone searching for comfort when life felt too heavy. The glow above them grew into more than a lamp. It became the backdrop of their unlikely friendship, a space where two souls were near the end of life, the other just beginning, found solace in each other's company. Autumn arrived, and with it came a chill that seemed to seep into the bones of the little neighborhood. The leaves turned amber and gold, scattering across Mrs. Green's porch, where Daniel often sat after school. But one evening, the house felt different. The light was still burning, but the chair where she always sat was empty. For days, Daniel waited, hoping she would return to her place under the glow. It was only when he saw the quiet gathering of people dressed in black outside her home that he understood. Mrs. Green had passed away. The news spread through the street in hushed voices, yet the porch light remained on, as steady as ever, its glow defying the silence that followed her absence. Daniel felt the loss more deeply than he thought possible. She had become a quiet anchor in his days, her words echoing in his mind like gentle reminders. He remembered her telling him that even in darkness, one small light could guide someone home. That thought stayed with him as he stood on her porch after the funeral, staring up at the bulb that refused to dim. The neighbors began to notice too. Some admitted they missed seeing her in her chair, waving to pass. Others confessed that the light had always given them a strange comfort, though they never realized it until it risked being gone. Slowly, the meaning of that glow began to settle over the street. It wasn't just Mrs. Green's ritual, it was her legacy. Daniel, still young but carrying her lessons in his heart, asked her relatives if he could keep the porch light burning. They agreed, touched by his devotion. And so, he made sure it stayed on, just as she had, becoming its quiet guardian. In time, the light became more than a memory of an old woman. It became a symbol for the whole neighborhood. Parents pointed it out to their children, saying it was the light that reminded them to be kind. Neighbors said it made them feel less alone during long nights. And Daniel, now older, knew it was the same light that had once pulled him out of his own shadow. Mrs. Green's house eventually grew quiet and empty, but the glow above the porch remained. Long after she was gone, her light still spoke in silence. That kindness lives beyond us, that even small gestures can reach further than we ever imagine, and that no one is truly lost as long as a light shines somewhere, waiting to guide them home. Sometimes the simplest things, a porch light, a smile, a small act of kindness, become the threads that hold people together. Mrs. Green's story reminds us that we don't need grand gestures to leave a mark. What we need is consistency, a willingness to care, and the courage to keep a light burning for others. Her glow may have been small, but it reached into the hearts of many. Perhaps that's the lesson we should carry, to be the light someone else might be searching for. If this story touched you, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more gentle tales that inspire reflection.